By the mid-1800s, railroads were eager to cross Indian Territory, vowing to bring new opportunity and prosperity to Cherokee Nation. In this Cherokee Almanac, we see instead the reality of what the railroads brought: hardship and new struggles. In the mid-1800s, the railroad companies were eager to cross Cherokee Nation's land and Indian Territory. The companies tried to entice our nation with promises of new opportunities and prosperity, but Cherokee Nation was wary of what railroads would bring with them.
Indian Territory was definitely viewed as a hindrance to expanding and to growing. They often looked at it as frustrating when they had to travel around Indian Territory or if they were needing resources.
I don't know that anyone really trusted the railroads. Certainly the tribes had no reason to trust the railroads. They had no reason to trust any of the, quote, white men in the country that had brought them to Indian Territory.
In 1866, after the U.S. Civil War, Cherokee Nation signed a Reconstruction Treaty with the United States. The treaty stipulated that the Cherokee Nation would have to allow 2 railroads to cross our land in Indian Territory.
And I think there was a lot of give and take in this treaty. There was a lot of talk that supposedly this was a punishment for the Confederate elements in the tribes to force them to use this railroad corridor through their native lands.
The major railroad companies were now in a race to gain the right to build tracks through Indian Territory. Per the U.S. federal government, the first railroad company to reach the border of Indian Territory would be awarded the right to build.
The Missouri-Kansas-Texas Railroad, also known as the Katy, was the first one to reach the northern border, and this gave them the right to build the north-south line through the Cherokee Nation.
The right to build a railroad crossing Cherokee land from east to west was still up for grabs.
Railroad developers are in a race to reach the northern and eastern borders. The first to reach the eastern border is the Atlantic Pacific.
The establishment of both of these railroads coming through Cherokee Nation, the Katy Railroad running north and south and the Union Pacific running east and west, they both intersect in the town of Veneta in the northeastern part of the Cherokee Nation.
Now that 2 companies have gained access to Cherokee Nation, the railroad construction would bring new struggles. Problems would arise concerning land ownership, our natural resources, and our livestock.
But they were looking for economic gain, whatever it may be, but it just couldn't be stopped. They came in, they cut down timber, what we would basically call clear cutting.
Another toll that it takes on us is the actual physical loss of land. This is Cherokee Nation, communally owned property, and we're having to give some of that up to allow the railroads to be able to come in and come through.
Along with the devastating toll on our land and resources, the railroads also bring more outsiders into our land.
The arrival of railroads also means the arrival of various people. Some of those people are going to come to build the railroad. Some of those people are going to come to settle in your community. Some of those people are going to come for nefarious means, for exploitation purposes. But ultimately, many of these people are going to put pressures on Cherokee people to give up additional lands.
So there was a lot of negative effects to the railroads. One of those being the introduction of alcohol, whiskey, prostitution. Whenever there was downtime from some of the rail workers, what kind of trouble are they going to get into?
Often these people brought adversity to the individual citizens of the Cherokee Nation.
Most of the workers accompanying the railroads are men, and those men are going to drink to excess, they're going to exploit and abuse women, and they're not going to be adequately policed. And that's because they're relying on the federal marshal system to police a vast territory that is sorely under-resourced.
In my opinion, the railroads did pave the way for allotment here in Indian Territory. They're looking for land, they're looking for resources. But with that was a lot of criminal activity. And so that was one of the excuses that they were using for pushing for Oklahoma statehood in general, was that the crime that was being committed here, and that they would be able to oversee that a little bit better if Oklahoma became a state.
We see that the railroads did not bring the promised prosperity to Indian Territory, but rather trouble and hardship. Railroads crossing the Cherokee Nation would be a catalyst for the troubling times that the Cherokee government would continue to face with the U.S. federal government for the next century.